Hello and greetings from the home of the 2016 Super Bowl champion Denver Broncos. I can only say that every 20 years, so I had to fit that in today. Guys, thanks so much for joining us today for the Train the Trainer, RCAP, and AWWA Small System Training. I'm Chad Weichel, Education and Workforce Manager at the American Waterworks Association, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Here are some tips to enhance your webinar experience. We recommend you close email, instant messengers, and any other programs not currently in use, as they may interfere with the smooth reception of the webinar, causing slide buffering and poor sound quality. Technical assistance can be found at the GoToWebinar technical support page at the link listed in your handouts and on the slide shown. I am pleased to present today, along with our panel of experts, Joy Barrett and Jeff Oxenford. Joy Barrett from RCAP will provide a quick review of the program and intended outcomes. Next, I will outline the procedures for effective workshop delivery, including choosing topics, using presentation materials and handouts, and modifying the content to fit the local audience. And then finally, Jeff Oxenford from RCAP will provide practical examples of the most effective ways to facilitate the learning activities. Now, I, along with our panel, will be happy to answer your questions throughout this webinar. Feel free to submit the questions at any time throughout this broadcast by using the question pane on the lower right of your screen. Please include your name, city where you are viewing the webinar, and the name of the panelist to whom your question should be directed. Let's begin. Joy Barrett is the Director of Training and Technical Services at RCAP. Joy will be covering the project overview and intended outcomes. Take it away, Joy.
Thanks so much, Chad, and thanks to everyone for joining us today for this very important webinar. I'm going to spend a few minutes setting the RCAP AWWA collaborative tasks in the context of the overall project and also discussing what we hope to achieve. First of all, just a few words about RCAP. We are, as a reminder to everyone, a national nonprofit of training and technical assistance providers with expertise in drinking water and wastewater, and in some cases, solid waste. We have about 160 staff nationwide, and those staff consist of certified operators, engineers, and specialists in management, finance, and administration. We are funded by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health and Human Services, and also state contracts. And some of our regions, which are shown here on this slide, have foundation funding as well. We work in all 50 states and several of the U.S. territories. The funding for this project was an EPA grant to RCAP and its partners, and the title of that project is Training and Technical Assistance for Small Public Water Systems to Achieve and Maintain Compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act, SDWA. Our partners are the American Waterworks Association, which is actually our largest partner outside of the RCAP network. Also, Illinois State Water Survey at the University of Illinois. You may know them as previously as smallwatersupply.org. They are now wateroperator.org. And then also we have two tribal partners, the Tribal Council of Arizona and United South and Eastern Tribes. The focus for this entire project is, first of all, to address the root causes of compliance failure. We are serving systems fewer than 10,000 people, and that includes community water systems, non-transient, non-community water systems, and also transient non-community water systems. For this project, we're working in 50 states and 2 territories, and we're working with selected tribes. Our target audiences are operators of small systems, managers, boards, and councils, and also select tribal and non-tribal water systems. RCAP has a number of training deliverables associated with this project, and I don't plan to go over all of the details in this particular slide or the next slide, but I just wanted to point out that the RCAP AWWA collaborative trainings are one of 6 categories of training deliverables for this particular grant. There's also a long list of technical assistance deliverables for the grant conducted by RCAP and its partners, and many of its partners. I'm not going to go through those since the particular partnership that's the subject of today's webinar addresses training deliverables. Our approach with training includes compliance-based capacity building training, so building the technical capacity of small systems, and we use a variety of methods including face-to-face sessions, webinars, web-based learning modules, and AWWA will be leading some e-learning modules as part of that. We also have video demonstrations, hands-on activities, and a huge library of web-based resources. The training topics are determined by close, proactive collaboration with primacy agencies throughout the project period, and also are building on assessment of compliance issues. So about a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, Jeff Oxenford, who will be speaking soon, did a thorough report of the causes of compliance failures among small systems throughout the country. And we are working with primacy agencies to determine the priority systems and the priority compliance topics. Topics not only address priorities of each primacy agency once we choose the workshop topics, but they also must incorporate state-specific regulations and implementation strategies. So you could say that the training and technical assistance of this project are actually prescribed for specific needs identified. In terms of what the trainings are and how they are delivered, as a collaborative effort, RCAP state folks and AWWA section volunteers are conducting day-long training and the agendas having been selected from the library of previously developed and newly developed materials in the AWWA library. To be effective, the training delivery must utilize adult training methodologies. Jeff will be speaking a lot more about these very soon. In some cases, the exercises are built right into the training modules. But in other cases, trainers need to use strategies for engaging participants, and those strategies will increase retention of the knowledge being shared. Again, Jeff will discuss this in a few minutes. Again, I want to stress that materials selected from national libraries must be tailored to state-specific regulations and implementation strategies. The training topics for all of your workshops, all of the workshops we'll be conducting as a project include the list here: regulatory review for operators, Safe Drinking Water Act for managers, boards, and councils, several aspects of distribution system, including the infrastructure itself and maintenance of that infrastructure, water quality issues, and cross-connection control. There are also strategies to comply with specific regulations, including nitrate, arsenic, and radionuclides, revised total coliform rule and coliform sampling, disinfection and stage 2 DBP compliance and treatment, the groundwater rule and wellhead protection, and lead and copper. Now, in addition to these topics, which are part of the AWWA library, RCAP also has other training modules related to compliance, and these include basic math and chemistry for operators, source water protection planning for surface water systems, best practices for distribution system operation and maintenance, O&M plans, and water loss. If you identify the need for trainings on any of these topics, please discuss this with your state RCAP staff member. The key outcomes that we expect from this collaborative set of tasks include increasing the knowledge of and competency of tribal and non-tribal operators regarding how to achieve and maintain compliance. Also, As a key outcome, we expect to see an increased number of small public water systems that are in compliance with SDWA regulations or who are making substantial progress toward that compliance as indicated by measured performance, reduced enforcement priority status, or other indicators. In addition to these that are shown on the screen, we have several other key outcomes that include an increase in the number of tribal operators acquiring and maintaining their certification, an increase in non-community public water system compliance, and sustainability resulting from gaining the technical knowledge necessary to better operate their groundwater systems, conduct appropriate maintenance, follow compliance guidelines, and troubleshoot well problems. And finally, a measurable number of non-community systems obtaining CEUs through wateroperator.org. We also hope for outcomes related to the collaboration between RCAP and AWWA. First of all, obviously, effective and efficient delivery of trainings that are relevant and meet the priorities of primacy agencies. And then also, very importantly, a lasting partnership between the two organizations that will benefit small drinking water utilities well beyond the life of the grant. For more information about this project, any of the topics I've talked about, you can contact me. Here is my email address and also my phone number. And with that, I want to thank you very much again for participating, and I will now turn the webinar back over to Chad.
Great, thank you, Joy. Thanks so much for that presentation. It really does help to have an overview, especially when we talk about how this specific AWWA and RCAP workshop will fit into the larger training program that RCAP has designed and is developing and delivering. So thank you so much for that. So next, I will be covering the guidelines for effective workshop delivery. So first of all, let's talk about the purpose. We're covering these steps so that you can effectively design, create, and deliver an effective workshop, and we also want to help RCAP and AWWA help us report the successes in the field to our funder, the EPA. By the end of this presentation, you should be able to describe the steps to set up a workshop. You'll be able to list the resources available, and you can explain the expectations for delivery. We're going to go over workshop setup. We're going to go over delivery, then we will finish with reporting. So let's get into it. Here are the steps to developing and delivering the workshop. First of all, you're going to view this Train the Trainer webinar that you're currently on, and for the folks that can't make it today, we will archive this for later viewing. You'll review the trainer's instructions, and I'll show you where that is actually right now. This is a web page that we host. It's awwa.org, and there, you see a long URL up here. The shortcut is awwa.org/area1, okay, and that's where you'll get to this page. There's a toolkit for our sections, for AWWA sections to use, and this really talks about the logistics and also some of the invoicing and financial pieces as well. This is where really the bulk of the content is, the lessons and presentations, and here's where you'll find the trainer instructions, and I'll show you what that looks like too. Let's see if I can find it. Here's the trainer instructions, so you guys can go over this later, but it covers a lot of what we're talking about here today, and it also has a few more details that will be helpful as you're designing and delivering this workshop. So after you review the trainer's instructions, one of the biggest pieces is RCAP and AWWA will meet with the primacy agency in your state, and we'll go over those details here in a second as well. And then assembling and tailoring the materials, and then finally preparing the materials, which includes printing participant handouts, preparing and printing the pre and post tests, and then printing evaluations. The trainer's instructions, what I just showed you guys, so that will review the trainer's role in workshop delivery. It also gives you some instructions on how to localize the content for your local audience, and it gives some tips and ideas on things that we've seen successful in the field. Making sure you keep a small system perspective in your presentation and also the activities, how to most effectively use the speaker notes, and then how to use the tests and the evaluation to help us report our performance. All right, one of the most critical pieces of this project is a meeting with the primacy agency. So this will be a joint meeting with RCAP and AWWA, and here are the things that you really want to identify. First of all, you want to get the primacy agency's perspective on what are the most important topics to cover. Where are the areas where they've seen violations to the Safe Drinking Water Act and they've seen trends in that area, and where would they like us to address most of the content. The other thing that you'd like to get from them is a list of the priority systems. What are the systems, the small systems in their area who are most in need of this type of training? And that will be really important for RCAP and AWWA to jointly market to those systems to try and get them to the workshop. You also want to see if they have a preference for a time and place of the workshop. Maybe there's a time of year that they want to avoid for other reasons, and maybe there's a place within the state that works better for these workshops than others. So you want to get their input on that. And then finally, you want to encourage the primacy agency to attend the workshop. We've found that they're really an invaluable resource at those workshops. They can provide a perspective, and also it just builds that relationship, not only between RCAP and the primacy agency, but also our sections and that primacy agency as well. Okay, next, after that meeting, it's time to assemble and tailor the workshop content. So let's go back over to that library and look at what the content is. So again, here are those steps that we've talked about and we're covering right now. And then here's a library of content. First of all, every workshop needs to have this introduction. It sets the groundwork on what the workshop will cover. It includes an icebreaker, and most importantly, it provides slides to give more information to the attendees on who RCAP is and what resources they can provide beyond this workshop, such as technical assistance, and it also gives more resources on publications and other resources available from the American Water Works Association. So here are the lessons. We've got coliform sample collection at 45 minutes, disinfection byproduct treatment strategies, 60 minutes, disinfection byproducts, 35, disinfection overview is an hour, distribution system infrastructure, 45 minutes, distribution water quality, 45, flushing, 45, main breaks and cross connections, 45, regulatory review is 90 minutes, and then we've got some newer lessons. The arsenic rule compliance at 60 minutes, nitrates are 80 minutes, radionuclides are 60 minutes, and then a source water assessment and protection lesson is an hour long as well. And then you'll see the tests. Here's the pre-test and post-test, and then here's the key as well. We don't expect the trainers to grade the pre and post-test. We will do that in-house for our reporting, but this is provided here for your reference in case you do want to grade those and give feedback to the attendees. And then finally, here's the attendee evaluation form. So keep in mind that the content that was developed for this workshop was developed for a national audience. So local tailoring may be necessary in all of the presentations. Download presentation materials, including the presentation. There's also participant handouts. The participant handouts really cover the key concepts. They provide the participants with a couple of key slides, and then work for the activities, and also notes are provided as well. But then you also want to download the lesson plan for the trainer for each selected topic. Once you've assembled that, you really want to tailor it. So if you're the trainer selected for this workshop, you really want to go through each presentation, look at each slide, go through the speaker notes, and decide what you really want to emphasize, and then see if there are areas where you need to de-emphasize based on local needs. Finally, we're going to prepare the materials. So the section, AWWA section, has funds available to help with printing costs. So if you want, as a trainer, you want to print off your own lesson plan, that's great. But if you want help with printing out the participant handouts for each lesson, usually they're somewhere between 2 and 4 pages. Then ask the section for help with that. And then also preparing and printing the pre and post tests. Actually, I want to go through that really quick. I want to show you what that pre and post test looks like. So here's the post test, and it'll take a second to download here. But you'll see each lesson has 3 or 4 questions that will measure their changes in learning. Let's see if it's coming up. It might not. So what you'll do is when you've selected the topics based on that primacy meeting and the discussions between RCAP and AWWA, then all of those topics are listed on the pre and post test. And so if you're not covering regulatory review, for instance, then you would just delete those regulatory review pieces from that pre and post test, and any other lessons that you're not covering, and that's how you would prepare those pre and post tests. Again, if you have questions on that, please let me know, and I've got my contact info here later. And then printing all the evaluations for the workshop as well. So a couple other workshop tips. Really want our trainers to focus on learning activities this go around. We have some really good learning activities within each of the lessons, and Jeff's going to cover really how to take advantage of those activities to make sure that there's ample time for them to apply that learning, and then ultimately they're going to retain more of that knowledge and change in behavior ultimately through those learning activities. So if you're crunched for time, do not skip those learning activities. If you need to leave content out at the end, if you're not able to get to some parts of the lesson, that's fine. But what we don't want to see are trainers going through the content and making sure that they present all the slides and cutting out the learning activities for time. That is not what we want. Again, we want the most effective workshops. So to provide the attendees a chance to work together in small groups, to be able to apply what they've learned to their own circumstances, and to be able to learn from each other. That's really one of the hidden powers of this workshop, is to get small system operators together who have like challenges and who have found solutions. And so for them to learn from each other is a really important piece. So that's what we want to focus on. Use the workshop flexibility to uncover small system needs and discussions and work towards the solutions. That's really what we're after here. So you've got flexibility within those lessons to dig deeper on various topics, and if you uncover some challenges that a few of the attendees are facing, then spend some time on that and really uncover some solutions that will help. So in summary, this is the page where you'll find the content. It's really important to tailor it to your local audience. The content here is really a starting point. You want to tailor it, one, towards the local audience, and then also just want to tailor it to your teaching style as well. So again, this is a starting point, but we're relying on you to tailor it and make it your own. Reporting is critical for us. We absolutely have to report performance, so help us with that by delivering the pre and post test, pre-test before the workshop, post-test immediately following, and then also the evaluation as well. And you can send that to us, and we'll consolidate it all and report it to the EPA. Help is available. I'm always here to help. Jeff and Joy are also available, and their contact info will be up at the end. But if you have any questions on any of the lessons, something that doesn't make sense, we've made quite a bit of changes from last year when we posted, because trainers, once they deliver it, they can find some bugs on different slides, and we're constantly looking to improve these presentations. So please let us know if you find anything or if you have any questions. So we've had some questions come in, so I think we're going to save those till the end. So please, as you do have questions, please continue to write those in the question pan, and then we will cover those immediately following Jeff's presentation. So Jeff Oxenford is the Training and Technical Assistance Specialist at RCAP. Jeff will be covering best practices to create dynamic learning moments. Please take it away, Jeff.
All right, thanks, Chad. Chad, I hope you can see my screen right now.
Yep, I sure do.
So good. So I appreciate Chad and Joy giving the context for the project. I'm going to sort of just talk a little bit about learning. And I know we spent a lot of time thinking about the process behind it. And I'm going to try and give a little discussion about really what we're hoping folks do, and that's learn something from our workshops. Some of the folks from RCAP may have heard my talk a little bit, but I'm going to sort of keep moving on with some of our concepts. And again, like all training, we just want to start with our learning objectives. And I'm really focusing on concepts for designing adult learning. And really, our goal is to improve knowledge retention. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about thinking about not just the content that we're trying to do, but really our students' knowledge retention. And then I'm going to cover a few of the strategies for effective adult learning, and I hope you'll be able to use these at the end of the workshop or in this discussion here. So we're going to start out with a poll to get an idea, because I'm going to talk about engagement during this presentation. So we're going to give you a chance to engage with some of these. And Chad, I believe you're opening the poll right now.
Yep, the poll is open.
Okay. And so what we really want to know is how much experience do you have training? Are you, in the 0 to 5 years? Have you been training for 5 to 10, 10 to 20, or more than 20 years? And for webcasts, one of the challenges always is to engage folks, and polling is one strategy. Folks in the RCAP network, Neil Worthen from RCAC and RCAC have done some amazing jobs on some of their webcasts. If you want to look at engagement, I recommend looking at some of the stuff that they have done. So we're going to give you one more minute.
Great, Jeff. The results are up. Can you see it on your screen?
I cannot see the results now.
That's okay. Stay on your screen. I'll just briefly cover it, but I think our attendees can see it as well. But from 0 to 5 years is 23%, 5 to 10 years is 22%, 10 to 20 years 23%, and more than 20 years is over 32%. So one of the things that strikes me when I look at this is that we have a tremendous amount of experience in this virtual room right now, and that's the same experience that you're going to find at the workshop that you conduct. So it's just really important to honor that experience and make sure that you draw on that as well. Draw on that in the activities. There's plenty of experience in the room, so they might have found solutions to problems that you're prompting them with. And so to really use those expertise for other folks to learn. And I think Jeff's going to go into a good example of that later in his presentation. All right, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks. Well, great. And again, one of the things to really recognize as a trainer, and it's a little intimidating to realize how much experience the folks I'm talking to. So a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about, you probably already have experience with. Use this as emphasizing what you've been doing in the past. So the slide I've got up here now is talking about, which picture matches your ideas of how adults learn. And, we have the presentation, we have the PowerPoint, the discussion, doing an experiment from a book, or actually just getting out there in the field and trying it. And when we ask folks about this, really folks learn from all methods. And so, having the all methods in your training is an effective way of getting some of the learning. But one of the things that I found really useful, and this is one example, I've taken it from the reference you can see down below, but the concept of what do they retain from those various methods. And if you look at the top of the triangle, you see lecture, where there's 5% retention after 24 hours, or when folks read stuff, 10%, AV, 20%, and demonstration, 30%. And really, we focus on these 4 things in most of our training opportunities. Most of the training I have done for the longest time focused on those areas, and really those are areas of low knowledge retention. Now, if you look down further on, discussion, practice by doing, and teaching or immediate use, here's where retention goes up. So the concept I've been sort of preaching to the choir a lot of cases is we really want to try and get folks down as much as possible into this discussion, practice by doing, or immediate use. So one of the things to be looking at is how can you get folks to some of these higher areas of retention in your training. So here's just an example, and I always like to show this. We designed our class with a lot of engagement. You can see flip charts all over the place. We had folks have activities and things, calculators on their tables and so forth. And we don't go longer than 10 minutes in our presentation, but we still have someone counting ceiling tiles. I'm sure you've all had this experience in your class. I love how some of these pictures, when you take them and you look at them and you go, oh yeah, look, he's counting ceiling tiles. So again, when you're doing this kind of presentation, think that there's going to be 5% retention. When you read, I saw this picture, I just thought this was perfect. Maybe 10% retention. I'm not sure if he's got that much. When you start getting discussion groups, it goes up. So you can have a small group discussion like this. This is actually a discussion. Craig Gorman here is one of the training partners, is putting people's data up on this chart, and you can see everybody is looking at their data on this chart and starting to discuss it. Again, retention very high. So we're trying to get this higher retention strategy. This is the same workshop, and I think this is another example when I took the pictures back and looked at them and said, wow, it really shows it. Val over here on the left is demonstrating location. He's doing locating a water line. We have a conversation going in the back, and we have someone standing way back here. And again, lower retention from the demonstration. But in this case, we put, this is a leak detection, listening. We have 3 people working on the device, listening for a leak. They're all actively engaged. And again, I think the knowledge retention is going to be much higher from this activity than the demonstration on the left. So the challenge is always to see how you can get over here. So with that said, I really think that adults learn when they engage with content. So the idea that we need to try to design is making sure the adults can learn and engage with things. And the model, the old model of being this empty bucket where you can pour in knowledge into it, I think we want to try to dispel that. We want to try to realize that our job is really to help folks engage with the content and not just pour information out that we hope they absorb. So with that said, I'm going to look for another engagement activity. I'm going to have another poll coming up. Chad, I hope you can pull up this poll here.
Yep, pulling it up. Poll's up now.
All right, so the poll has, so there's 5 different things here. Which of the statements is true here? It's critical to provide all the details, every little detail. If we put it on the slide, folks have got it. It's better to put more on the slide and use a smaller font. And are there any questions in effective engagement? Or less is more, focus on engagement around key points.
Good, Jeff. The audience is answering it now, and we're getting close to closing that poll.
Okay. So I'll give you one more second.
All right, Jeff, poll results are in. We tried to pull a fast one on them, but they got us. So it's critical to provide all the details was 2%. If we put it on the slide, they've got it with 0. Less is more, focus on the key points. 91% of the audience selected that. It's better to put more on the slide and use less, smaller font, 1%, and then asking, are there any questions, is effective engagement is 6%.
Great. So we have the top 4. Yeah, we really were waiting towards the one on the bottom. The idea of critical, all the details. Again, people can't get all the details. The idea of putting the content on the slide. I've heard people say, I got to put everything on this slide because it'll be a reference material. And my thought is, if it's a reference material, give them a handout. It doesn't need to be on the slide because that slide is something to be engaging them with. The same with smaller fonts. And I've done all of these, by the way. Using smaller fonts is, you try to put too much on, eventually people can't read the slides. The 4th one, are there any questions, is a technique we've used a lot, and it's still a good technique, and it is engagement. But is it the only effective engagement strategy? Probably not. So I always like to say, I put this one in here, this one could go either way. I mean, it is engagement. The question is, if you speak for an hour and then you ask, are there any questions at the end? I'm not sure if that's effective. So the one I'm really after is really focusing on the engagement around the key points. So this question, we were actually having a discussion, and it was like, what is the best trainer? Is our job a facilitator of the learning? Is our job to be a lecturer or to be an entertainer? And I think in a lot of cases, originally I was thinking more of a lecturer and then became more of an entertainer. But really, I think our role, the message I'm trying to get out there is we're really facilitating learning. And it's great if we're a good lecturer and a good entertainer, but really it's how do we get the learning in our students that we really want to be after. And with that in mind, we really need to think about adults and adult learning. And we started out with that one poll question, about knowledge and skills. And, adults really need to know why they're learning. It needs to be practically applicable. They need to be involved in their learning. But these last 2, knowledge and skills, acknowledged and competent. I know the folks on this call, I mean, this was a 30-some% that have been training for quite a long period of time. And so, again, I recognize that you all probably have had experiences of what we're training, or what I'm training on right here. In an in-person thing, we'd be trying to really tap that experience. And this is an example where we got a chance to tap experience. This was a storage tank sanitary survey in Colorado. And Kelly over here is the CDPHE engineer. She is walking people through a sanitary survey. Really good speaker, really good content, but you can still see when the speaker's out there, we're having some side conversation. It's pretty hard to stop all those with a demonstration. But again, one of the things that happened, just sort of happened in this experience, and I'm really glad I got this picture, but this gentleman here is one of the students in the class, and he runs a water system for a summer camp down the road. And the amazing thing was he was the former director of Buena Vista's water, and the guys from Buena Vista didn't know him before this. And he built this storage tank and could tell stories about how the tank blew in from the wind when they were building it and how they had to reinforce it. But everybody listens to him. So the trick with that, the take-home message was, this guy was sitting in my classroom, and if I didn't engage him and we didn't learn from him, we would have lost out a great opportunity in our training. So I kind of think of a toolkit. What do we do as trainers? And the first rule is, or I call it the 10-2 rule. It's for every 10 minutes of content, you have some 2 minutes of engagement. And we'll talk more about that. And then I'm going to talk about some of these engagement strategies. So, oops, I went beyond it. There we go. For the 10-2 rule, for every 10 minutes of content, think about 2 minutes of processing for your students. So I kind of put a mental clock. I look at a clock as I'm training, and every 10 minutes, I make sure I get some opportunity for our students to process, to think about, to work with the content that we've just covered. And it's best if we can intentionally structure that content. So like the picture on the bottom, we actually had a worksheet in their book. They've been following along slides. We go to a worksheet. We give them a chance to do that. So for every 10 minutes, think about, how do we engage our students? And for engagement strategies, the couple I think of are, you share with a partner. So you turn over to the person next to you. What do you think about this? Or you can have, like the picture shows, a small group discussion. And we find that these operator discussions are pretty well received, and a lot of good content happens. Sometimes we facilitate them, sometimes we don't. We've had actually good success without having anybody as a facilitator. Having worksheets, problem-solving games, or things along that line, then the demonstrations or hands-on activities. So those are some ideas of engagement. But again, I've got all sorts of people on this webcast who've got lots of experience. So what I'd like you to do is go to the question box, and I want to learn from you. So why don't you, if you get to take a second, is access the question box and type in a technique that you've used, or an example of something you've used to promote engagement in some of your workshops. So you're going to take a minute or two to start typing in some questions. And Sue, I am not seeing, or Chet, I'm not seeing any of the questions coming up.
Yep, we'll push them to them. But so folks on the line, you can go ahead and type in the techniques that you've seen work really well in promoting engagement, and then Jeff will send those over to you as they come in. And you should be having some come your way right now.
Looking to see. Actually, I am not seeing anything coming up yet.
Well, Jeff, some that are coming in, we've got an open forum. Ricky Cruz sent that in. Exercises, activities, games are effective in my experience. Effective openers and games. Google Earth. Somebody used Google Earth as an activity.
Oh yeah, Google Earth is a great one.
Yep. Sometimes I pair people who are not getting it with those who are. sampling exercises, line tracing, group discussions, simulated board exercises, hands-on testing, prizes for the right answer, tossing a softball cube or object around to give somebody the floor, running through sample problems, giving them a problem to solve. Got a lot of really good suggestions here.
So one thing we may do is capture this. I'm not sure exactly how we can get it back out to folks afterwards, but I'll capture it for sure and take a look at it. But yeah, you can hear the ideas coming from our trainers. I mean, yeah, the Google Earth one I've seen, the talking stick or the handing a ball so people can talk for engagement. Things like that work. The more you can try to do, the more activities that we can, the better our training can be. So great examples. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples from the curriculum that you've got right now, just of ideas of where you can sort of plug in this engagement. Again, here's the link to where the curriculum is. And one thing in a lot of the curriculum have these things called knowledge checkpoints. So you'll see this in some of the curriculum in the slides. And so, this question of, what are some non-treatment options for arsenic compliance? So you've already discussed this. So you could either do a table discussion or turn to a partner and have a discussion. But you can use this for small group discussions. Again, it's easiest, you ask a question and one person in the room answers it. But if you can break them into smaller groups, we can, get some more interaction going. In the curriculum, there are these discussions. So these discussions, again, are perfect opportunities to be able to, when you see this slide, go, oh, here's my break, here's my 10-2 moments. Got to give them at least 2 minutes to discuss this. And then your decision is then small groups report back to the whole group or not. In some cases, it's worth doing. In some cases, just having that small group discussion is really valuable. And then again, there will be activities in the curriculum. And again, these activities have been designed to really get people to get a chance to play with some of the content. So as Chad mentioned, you really want to spend time and take a look at these examples through the curriculum. You may have to do some creativity. If we don't have one of these checkpoints and you've gone 10 minutes, you may have to come up with something. So again, be thinking about this as you're working with this curriculum, taking these opportunities that were put in the slides, but create other ones if you need to. And I kind of think of, again, Chad already covered this, but, which is more important, covering all the content or providing time for engagement? If we go back to that learning triangle earlier and thinking about that, they're probably going to retain more if you have engagement. So I'm, again, all about retention and engagement. So just in summary, again, I stress over and over again, get people engaged, they're going to retain it, they're going to probably get a lot more out of the workshop. For every 10 minutes, make sure there's an activity or discussion. You can use are there any questions, but I think are any questions, I don't think that's enough to really engage people. So one comment I always think about is that someone told me is, delivering PowerPoint is easy and talking is easy. Engaging your participants, that's a whole lot more of a challenge for us as trainers. And that's the one thing I can continually work on. So work on that and continue to evolve with that. So with that, here's my email address. I would love to hear any other ideas, how to make this presentation better, or how to continue to make your training, and especially as you have work with the content and under this agreement, we'd be real interested in getting your feedback. So with that, I think, Chad, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
My mute button is now off. Thank you, Jeff, so much for that presentation. We had some really good positive feedback from the attendees on that adult learning information. Really good information on how to take advantage of the content materials and how to really take the most advantage of those interactive pieces as well. So thank you for that. Okay, everybody, we've got some good questions that have come in. If you have questions on something that we didn't cover or need clarity or anything, please type those questions into your question pane on the GoToWebinar platform, and we will address those now. Jeff and Joy, I've got the questions on my end, so I will take first pass at them, but please give me some input if I'm missing anything. First question from Ricky Cruz was wondering about the format. Do they need to be 8-hour classes, or would 2 4-hour classes meet the requirements? Our recommendation is to conduct a full one-day workshop, but in many cases that's not going to be the best fit. So coming out of that primacy agency meeting, it's really best to determine that at that point. So speaking with RCAP and AWWA and getting input from the primacy agency, determine if a one-day 8-hour workshop will be best, or if you want to break it up into 2 4-hour workshops. We've had some sections do that in the past, so sometimes they would do 2 Fridays, do 1 Friday, 4 hours, and then a week later do the second part of that class. That works really well. You know, the challenge here is getting small system operators to be able to leave their system for a whole day, and in some cases that just doesn't work. So we do want to provide you guys with flexibility on delivering that. So if you do the one-day 8-hour workshop, we expect about 6.5 hours worth of content in that. So taking a 1-hour break for lunch, and then 2 15-minute breaks in the morning and the afternoon. So as you look at the content available, keep that in mind as you're building that full-day workshop. Anything to add, Joy or Jeff, on that?
No, Chad, you've covered it well. Thank you.
Great. Is the Spanish version finally available? Roberto Maldonado, thanks for that question. I'm going to follow up with you offline on that with more specifics, but we didn't have translation built in to this round for the new content, but I'll work with you on figuring out the best way to do that. I know Puerto Rico translated all of our content materials last year, so I'll work with you to figure out the best way to address that. You know, we have some good feedback, and this isn't the first time I've heard it. In some cases, after reviewing the modules, it looks like the time frame to introduce the activities is very short. What do you recommend for efficient use of time and training? I'm going to take another look at that. I mean, Jeff and I had a discussion about that too. I think some of the timelines are still a little too tight, so I'm going to take a look at that this week. There's some modifications I need to make on some of the slides anyway, so I'm going to take another good look at the timeline and make sure that we've got enough time devoted to those interactive pieces. So thanks for that feedback. We will take another look at that. I'm enjoying this adult learning training. Thank you for providing. Thank you, Kathy Rogers, for that feedback. Thanks, Jeff, for that great presentation. Can we get a copy of Jeff's presentation? Yes, absolutely. In the GoToWebinar platform, if you look at it, there is a place that says handouts. If you expand that pane, then there's a PDF link to all of the slides here today. If you have trouble finding that or trouble downloading that, please follow up with us. Send us an email and we'll get you those slides as well. There's a question here from Joan Douglas. 30 people confirm attendance, 5 people show up. How do you adjust activity plan for a larger group? Jeff, I'd like to get your input on this, but first I would just say, you know, a lot of the activities that we've built into those lessons are really flexible based on workshop size. We really didn't try and develop any activities that required 20 or 30 people in attendance. We've had attendance as low as 5 people in some workshops. Most of the workshops average right around 20, and some of the workshops we've seen over 50. So we've really tried to create activities that are very flexible with the audience size that you have. So Jeff covered some of those strategies, and some of those strategies are put in the lesson and in the activity themselves. They give you different options on if you want to deliver it as a think, pair, share, for example, where you ask each of the attendees to think about the answer, then you pair them up with a partner and they discuss and then they share what comes out of that. That can be done with really any class size. But then there's other ones that we ask you to create some small groups for discussion as well. So really the activities are pretty neutral on class size, and you've got flexibility to adapt those and modify them towards to whoever shows up, whatever size that audience is. Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's a good comment. I think probably the one trick with a small group like that, or 5 or whatever, is just that the instructor gets out of the way for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the trick is you may want to pair them, or you may want to have all 5 of them discussed, but just get out of the way for 2 minutes. I think is the important part where they can actually think and process. And the best part as a trainer, when you have these 2-minute, 3-minute activities, is you can recenter yourself and go back and look at the slides. So I love activities when I'm a trainer because I can really go back and really think about what I'm going to be presenting next. So still take advantage of the opportunities, even with a small group. Just think about getting yourself out of the way. On the flip side, we do have some pretty large groups sometimes, 50 plus, and the smaller the group size, sometimes the better. I mean, you can do up to groups of 6 to 8, and the room chatter can get pretty loud. But I think it's one of those things where, again, is just being flexible and figure out what works for the room and the setting that you're in.
Great. We've got another, just a suggestion here. We've had some success conducting training 4 hours in the afternoon and then 4 hours on the next morning. Yep, we have a few different states that do that as well, so keep that in mind. That's another method for delivery. Good question on how do you spend 90 minutes on the nitrate rule? Well, please take a look at the content there on that page, and you'll see what we go through on that. In most of those new rule compliance, I mean, we do set the table on that. We need to set the stage on what the compliance rules are, and then we really get into applying that information, and we go through some scenarios that they're likely to face out in the field. Let's see, intro, pretest, and wrap post-test will add time to content not always considered when selecting content and time. That is a great point. So realize that you are doing a pretest beforehand, which will likely take at least 10 minutes, and the same at the end, the post-test, they might take between 10 and 15 minutes. So you need to make sure that you've built that into your workshop schedule as well. Should there be trainers associated with each of the organization, RCAP, AWWA, and Privacy Agency? Great question. As the program was designed, we selected which states would have an RCAP primary trainer and which states would have an AWWA primary trainer. But in all cases, we've encouraged, if you're not taking the lead on training, we would love, for instance, if RCAP is taking the lead in Kentucky and they're providing the lead trainer, we would still love our AWWA section of Kentucky and Tennessee to provide somebody, maybe they'd be a volunteer, maybe you can find some room in the budget, but we would like a secondary instructor facilitator for a number of reasons. One, it's an 8-hour workshop is a long time for one trainer to lead and for the audience to concentrate on one trainer. And the other bit is that I just think it rounds out the expertise more if the more trainers who are available. We can have the RCAP perspective, we can also have the AWWA perspective, and that just makes for a stronger workshop. So again, if you are not the lead instructing organization, we would still encourage you to provide a secondary facilitator to assist as well. Some volunteers in our section missed this webinar. Is there any way that the volunteers may have an opportunity to comply with this requirement? Yes, we will archive this webinar. We will send out the link for that archive. So for those who could not make this live date, they can access this later. Just looking through some of the other questions here. The larger the group, the more time-consuming activities will be. How do you deal with large groups? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really valid point. If you do have an audience of 40 or 50, to really provide them with enough time to share and provide feedback, it is just going to take a little bit more time. So the lesson plans for each lesson are really a starting point. And as you see, you want to spend a little bit more time on an activity, or you think that an activity will take longer than that is, then just go ahead and modify that schedule. Again, these are all starting points. You do not have to follow these down to the minute. You've got flexibility. You are the experts in the room, and we are relying on that expertise for you to make this training work most effectively for the audience.
Yeah. Hey, Chad?
Yeah.
Just a comment on that. When you have, what takes a lot of time, depending on the room size, is having small groups report back to the big group.
Mm-hmm.
So a trick I've started to use a little bit is when I have really, really large groups, I may get 1 or 2 tables report back, or I may not have them report back at all to the full group. So that's just one of those things to be thinking about. Anytime everybody reports back to the full group, that takes a lot of time. So you may want to look at options of maybe not having them report back, but just discussing. And still, having them discuss is incredibly valuable.
Great. Good. Another question, if workshops are provided on 2 days, do you expect the same persons to attend each day, or can attendance be different? Another great question. We are hoping that we can have the same attendance on both days, so that's how I would market it, that these aren't 2 separate trainings, but these are trainings part 1 and part 2 in order to get the most attendees from that part 1 to get to part 2. But no, they can absolutely be different. And there's different ways to track that on that. So if you have any questions on that, let us know. But we don't have any requirement that the people from workshop part 1 have to be in workshop part 2, or if it doesn't count. Part of that flexibility on doing 2 4-hour workshop is providing that flexibility so the most operators can attend that. So and that's fine. Let me see, just going through the rest of these questions. If you have hands-on activity, how do you determine the max attendees to have a successful workshop and hands-on activity? Good question. Those hands-on activities where they're dealing with equipment or they're really going through a scenario, those can be difficult. We've got a couple of those in there where they're dealing with a scenario faced by a section or by a system. But for the most part, most of our activities are really getting into a scenario-based problem, but then asking questions to get them to apply the content that they had just learned in the previous slides. So I don't think that we have a real big problem with max attendees. Again, we've seen workshops that had upwards of 75 in them, and they were still effective and successful. So I think, again, this content is really flexible on that audience size. Anything to add on that, Jeff or Joy?
Yeah, just again, with a hands-on activity, if you have really large groups, you just need more people to help you do the hands-on activities. So if you have volunteers in the room or something along that lines that are helping you to do that, if you can, continue to split up in small groups when you have hands-on activities, that works also.
And that's another great reason to have section staff or volunteers be available for any collaborative workshop that we have, even if they're not the primary trainers, that they can be able to help with breakout groups as well.
Great. Yeah, and that kind of leads me to this next question. How do you get folks to knock off the chit-chat when in breakout groups, especially if not a lot of trainers to go around the room and help facilitate that? Jeff, I'd love to get your input on that too, but my initial thoughts are, that's one of the reasons we really encourage that secondary trainer, facilitator to help for this situation exactly. As the presenter presents the slides, once you move into facilitation, it really does help to have that second facilitator to move around the room. Typically how I address a challenge like that is proximity. I'm moving around, checking on the groups, making sure that they don't have any questions, and the more I can move around, typically the more on task those groups remain. So just moving around, and then also I'll inject into some of those small group discussions and ask them a question that gets them moving on that. The other side of that is we don't want to knock off all of that. You know, some of that stuff is necessary for small groups to really create a bond together, and so that they can really create a small relationship in a brief amount of time, so that they can share information with each other. So a little bit of that is okay, and if it gets to be where, you know, it's impacting time and schedule, then again I would move around and use my proximity to help keep those small groups on task. Jeff, any input on that?
Oh, I agree with the proximity comment 100%. I just sort of will stand behind him, or I'll interject a question to the group sometimes. Mm-hmm. The idea of having the time structured, so having an activity or having a question in front of folks, and, you know, really helps keep them on task. But yeah, I mean, you're still going to get the discussion going, and I really agree with Chad with all your comments.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. Just working through some of these last questions. Guys, we're really close to finishing up, so thank you for these questions. Let's see. Yeah, this is a really good question, and I'd like to get Joy and Jeff's input on this as well. But how do we get people to attend when rural water dominates training in your state? Joy, Jeff, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Jeff, you want to start?
I was actually hoping you were going to answer that one.
I really think that adequate publicity is good. I mean, these are free workshops, and if you are have extensive information about the value of this workshop, maybe including the strategies for this workshop, I think you're going to be able to get people into the seats. And another advantage of this project is that people get to see that RCAP and the AWWA sections are really valuable resources for offering the training. So I think the key is in how engaging your publicity strategies are. I know I'm not trying to underestimate that challenge, but we have the opportunity through this project to make a name for ourselves and our organizations as very valuable training resources.
Agreed.
Finally, let me see. I think we've got one last question, then we'll wrap up. If we split the workshop into 2 parts in different days, it still counts as one workshop? Question mark. If we split the workshop into 2 parts on different days, it still counts as one workshop. So I guess how I would address this is really the deliverable. If your state has one workshop to deliver, and some states have more than one based on size and geography, but if your state has one workshop to deliver, we expect 8 hours worth of contact time. So if that's delivered in a 1-day workshop, then obviously that counts. But if you're splitting into 2 days, then we would want 2 4-hour workshops to satisfy that deliverable. Okay, guys, we are getting to the end of our time. There's a couple more questions, but I will follow up with those later. Some of the questions were, are we going to get some feedback and a printout on these questions? We need to see what's possible with GoToWebinar on this, but we're going to try and capture all of these questions and then send out those questions with the responses attached to that for all those in attendance. And then we'll also capture that for those who have not been able to make it to today's webinar. So with that, we will conclude the Q&A. We will conclude our webinar. I do want to thank Joy and Jeff for their time and their presentations today, and I wanted to thank the audience today for joining us. I know this is a really important workshop from our perspective, and I want to thank you for making the time to ensure that we have effective delivery of this workshop. So thank you so much for everybody who attended.
Thanks.